We are now in episode 6 of the Ottoman Portuguese War, and this one's called the Great Portuguese Offensive. So let's see how Portugal responds to all of this.
The Ottoman defeat at Diu in 1538 might have seemed like a significant blow to Ottoman ambitions in the Indian Ocean. However, despite the failure of Hadim Suleiman Pasha, governor of Ottoman Egypt, to capture the port, the more extensive campaign of 1538 was welcomed in Constantinople as a huge success. On the military side, control of Yemen had been won by the Ottoman fleet before it departed for Diu. But Hadim Suleiman, despite his age and infirmity, was also waging a determined diplomatic campaign against Portugal, one that was expanding the Ottomans' reach far faster than ships or soldiers could. At the same time, Hadim Suleiman was besieging Diu, operating out of the Karela region and led by Pate Marikar, began preying on Portuguese shipping in South India and the Sea of Ceylon, allied with the Ottomans in a close echo to the Barbary corsairs of North Africa. Even as far away as modern Indonesia, the outreaches and political connection.
Okay, the Portuguese became a major threat to the Southeast Asian Sultanate, who feared the... Oh, wow. Okay, so I have to say that what caught my attention the most from that is the diplomatic front that the Ottomans are having. I mentioned a few episodes ago that the Ottomans' PR is much better than the Portuguese. When they first started and got involved, many people were flocking to the Ottomans, looking to them as the protectors. And again, the Ottomans were kind of shown as sort of liberators. Meanwhile, the Portuguese have kind of been on their own. They haven't really utilized, I feel like, diplomatic ties, and they've kind of just been relying mainly on their own strength. And, you know, at the end, the PR, it's all about the influence, right? And the Ottomans' influence is ever growing. Meanwhile, the Portuguese are kind of, to many of these, you know, nations, kind of the bad guys in the conflict, as it were. You know what I mean? So, I feel like the Ottomans' PR is definitely helping as more flock to them, and this might come back to bite the Portuguese in the butt maybe later.
Of 80-year-old Hadim Suleiman were winning bloodless victories for the Ottoman Empire, with 4 ships bearing a tribute in spice from the Sultan of Aceh arriving in the Red Sea in 1538, before returning to Aceh the following year, loaded with Ottoman troops under the command of Hamad Khan. Even in Gujarat, the defeat at Diu had not been as complete as it might have seemed. The Ottoman merchant community in Gujarat held enough political sway in the Sultan's court to get their leader, Khaja Safar, appointed governor of Surat, and enough wealth to organize fortifications and ships of their own in preparation for another attack. In light of these successes, Hadim Suleiman Pasha would be elevated to the position of Grand Vizier by Suleiman the Magnificent in 1541, heralding a period of intense Indian Ocean focus for the Ottoman Empire. On the Portuguese side, by 1541, the situation was beginning to look rather dire. Portugal remained the dominant Indian Ocean power in many respects. Both Pate Marikar's fleet and Hamad Khan's 1539 attempt to besiege Portuguese Malacca had been defeated. But Ottoman influence remained strong in both theatres, and as the Ottomans aimed mostly to protect independent Muslim merchants and revitalize the long blockaded Red Sea trade routes, they continued to find easy allies against Portuguese dominance. Further complicating this period is that both Sultan Suleiman and King John III of Portugal claimed a divine mandate to control the Indian Ocean, Suleiman through his role as Caliph, and John through the Treaty of Tordesillas and accompanying papal bull into Ketera.
Okay, so that's interesting. Almost two sides of the same coin in a sense. And once again, like, you're seeing the Ottoman influence is growing, and despite any setbacks that they have, any defeats, that influence is still growing. So they just might win just based off of their influence, their great PR. Everyone is looking to them as like liberators, as protectors, as champions. Meanwhile, the Portuguese, on the other hand, seem to be more and more alienated from the general region. So I feel like the Ottomans, they may not be winning the decisive victories, but they seem to still be winning at least the overall war, which is influence and like prestige and power over the Indian Ocean, right? So, like I said, I'm not sure how this is all gonna end. But so far, man, I just feel like, hmm, let's keep watching.
This religious aspect of the conflict made compromise difficult, and even as the Portuguese position grew weaker, John remained unwilling to make significant concessions in exchange for peace. Instead, after being on the defensive throughout the past years, the Portuguese decided to put their fleet to the test in a major counterattack, targeting the Ottoman shipyards of Suez. In January of 1541, the governor of Portuguese India, Estevão de Gama, son of legendary explorer Vasco da Gama, sailed for the Red Sea with a fleet of 40 ships and 2,300 soldiers. The expedition was facing major problems before it had even departed, however. Kezja Safar in Surat had caught wind of the attack and sent the Ottomans advance warning. The fleet would also find itself plagued with massive supply issues, becoming apparent as they reached their first destination of Massawa. The intention had been to make only a short stop in Massawa, from which Estevão's younger brother, Cristovo, and his 400 musketeers could disembark while the fleet resupplied before continuing on to Suez. But with the Ethiopian Adel War raging and famine ravaging the Horn of Africa, the Ethiopians in Massawa were unable to provide nearly enough food or supplies to last the large fleet to Suez. This meant that nearly half of the ships and soldiers intended for the Suez assault were forced to stay behind in Massawa, living off the meager charity the subjects of Galorgios could provide. In addition, the Portuguese were largely unfamiliar with the Red Sea, having previously simply blockaded it at the Strait of Aden, and the poor winds caused the remainder of Estevão's ships to make slow progress. The thirsty and dwindling fleet was forced to divide twice into ever smaller task forces, raiding Suakin and several villages along the Arabian coast, while heat and lack of water took a sharp toll. By the end of March, only 16 small-oared ships and 250 men remained with Estevão, the rest of the fleet having turned back to Massawa. This paltry force arrived in Suez in late April to find it well reinforced, with a strong battery of shore guns and 2,000 Sipahi cavalry. After a short exchange of fire, the hopelessness of the Portuguese situation became clear.
Yeah, they lost before they even showed up. And this was just a supply issue. The logistics were not favorable. That in conjunction with, the weather, obviously the heat, the logistics, as I said, with the supplies, not having great resupplying stops due to the Ethiopian, scarcity, and then there's the unfamiliar geography of where they were going to. Everything was a disaster. This was a defeat just that they brought on themselves. Holy crap.
And a retreat was called. Another excruciating month would pass before Estevão made it back to Massawa, where he found that mutiny had racked the fleet as it lay in port, with over 100 soldiers deserting, only to be set upon and killed by tribesmen under Ahmed Gran's banner. More ships and men were lost to storms on the return to Goa, a humiliating end to the largest scale offensive the Portuguese had ever attempted in the Indian Ocean. In the aftermath of this catastrophic defeat, the Portuguese were forced to watch as Ottoman merchants ventured out even further, and Hadim Suleiman won ever more allies, with Ottoman merchants regularly trading as far south as the Swahili coast by 1544.
Dude, the Ottomans are winning. This is a great use of just PR and diplomacy. The Ottomans are dominating now, and they're not even like winning decisive battles. You know, this is just full-on PR. Their influence, their diplomatic warfare is kind of just amazing in this series, and they have the Portuguese floundering. Wow. I did not expect this war to go like this, but this is beyond impressive. Again, like, the Ottomans are kind of dominating right now, without even having to lose men. And I guess we'll see if the tide of war shifts. Like I said, I don't know how this is gonna end, or where this is going, but I'm looking forward to finding out. And tomorrow we'll find out more of how things are gonna go.